You're with Kat Feeney on ABC Radio Brisbane and Queensland.
Is someone you know, or are you yourself perhaps, thinking about retiring? Maybe sometime in the not-so-distant future. But are you worried that with inflation and the cost of living on the up, that your retirement will have to wait? In the past financial year, only 3 superannuation funds reported that they made money for their members. So does that mean that you'll ever be able to afford to retire? Phil McGann is the Director of Claritude Financial Planning in Brisbane. And Phil, you reckon we should stop worrying about the stock market so much? Why is that? Hello, by the way.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to listeners. Look, very true. It's something I say to my clients often. I say there's a lot more to retirement than worrying about what went on Wall Street last night. If you're living that way, you're very anxious all the time. The share market rises and falls on a daily basis. That's the nature of it. So it's the point I'm making is you shouldn't worry too much about those sorts of things because you really should be mapping your retirement out into the future. You can't change the markets. You can't change and have impact on things out there like inflation, but you can have impact on what you spend your money on, how you live your life and how you want to live your retired life. That's what you really should be concentrating on.
But super funds have been taking big hits, Phil. It feels like they're worth less every week. You're also in control of who you park your super with, aren't you?
You are indeed. Now, the interesting thing about superannuation fund and returns, obviously it's a point in time. 30th of June, the figures came out. 3 super funds made money last year. And the average super fund lost about 2 or 3%. The previous year, the average super fund made about 20%. So it's all relative. And really over the last 10 years, the super fund returns have been pretty good. And really it's a case of people not worrying too much about the here and now. Since those figures came out, in the last 2 months, the share market is up about 8%. So any of the losses you lost last year, you've recouped by a reasonable amount as well. So, and I think a lot of people who look at their super fund too often would see that by now. Okay. They can see that they've actually recouped some of those losses in the recent couple of months.
Look, I know your message is just don't worry, but we'll get to that. But just on the subject of super losses, what are some of the factors that account for the dips that we have seen? What's contributing to this?
Basically, what's happening there is the overall economic environment we're in. We've got high inflation. The only way the Reserve Bank here in Australia and the Federal Reserve in the US and central banks around the world, the only way they can counter that is to actually slow the economy down by jacking interest rates up. When you put higher interest rates up, you curb economic activity and you actually slow the economy down. That leads to lower profits for companies and share prices come off. That's basically, in a nutshell, how it sort of works. But over time, if you're invested in quality companies, will give you good profits into the future, dividends and share returns as well. You can't do much about inflation in the macro sense yourself, but you can sort of try to work your own finances out as best you can and concentrate on things that matter to you.
1:15. My name is Kat Feeney and you're with Phil McGann of Claritude Financial Planning. Just a reminder, of course, that our conversations are always general in nature.
Very general.
Yep. So you really do want to seek that personalised, tailor-made advice that considers your circumstances. But Phil, can we talk about super in a little bit more detail? Because there is such a thing, isn't there, as an index-linked super account that pays out more in line with inflation?
I think what you're getting at there are actually CPI-adjusted indexed bonds that you can actually do that adjust for inflation and actually pay you more out on those. Now, they're priced accordingly, and so whether you should be investing in those is a personal investment choice, obviously an advice needed on that case. The best thing you can do is to make sure, again, that you're invested in quality assets that will give a better than inflation return over time. Inflation won't be high forever. It'll come down. Things will come off eventually. And it's just really a case of whether we're looking for a hard landing or a soft landing in the economy. That's the bigger issue, I suppose, on those.
I mean, and look, if we've got to consider the last couple of years, the pandemic, and young people, maybe people who tapped into their superannuation.
A lot of people drew money out. You could draw out $10,000 either side of the end of the financial year a couple of years ago during COVID. And so there are some younger people out there who took $20,000 out of their super just to make ends meet, to get by. That's problematic when you've got a very small super balance for the longer term, although they do have a long term. It's different if you're in your 50s and you tried to do that, but the balance was probably a lot higher than some of the younger people as well.
Yeah, and of course there's the consequence of maybe not having work through the last couple of years and the impact that has on your superannuation balance. We're going to get to the optimistic don't worry theory in a sec with Phil McGann on ABC Brisbane and Gold Coast. I'm Kat, but I wanted to bring in Caroline at Banyo on this point because, Caroline, you feel like you'll be working until the day you die, do you? What's happening?
I feel like I will be. I know I will be.
Can tell me your story, Caroline? What's your situation?
Well, I'm 56. I don't yet own my own home. I was out of work for 22 months before I picked up a contract, which I started in March, and I had to draw down on my super. So I did take a $10,000 lump sum out, but it's just simple math. I don't own my home, even though I don't have a huge mortgage, and with my age being a major factor, and not having sufficient in super, it's just easy to work out. I'll be working till the day I die.
What would be, if you're in your mid-50s now, Caroline, ideal circumstances, what would be the age where you would have hoped to retire and step away from work?
70,
in
I
your
guess.
70s, yeah. Yeah, okay. And so you feel like, and as you said, you've done the math on your situation, you know it better than me or Phil, and you feel that's not achievable now. That's what you're saying.
I do,
Yeah.
but I feel a lot of your readers would be familiar with a writer by the name of Scott Pape, who wrote The Barefoot Investor, and he put out a newsletter recently saying that you actually don't need $1 million to retire on. So that's actually got me to thinking, and he put out some different figures, different to the ABS. So I'm looking into what I would actually need, apart from owning my home outright. How could I achieve that in the next 15 years?
That's a great question, Caroline. And I guess, Phil, this sort of touches on the point that you've been making, that there isn't a perfect figure, of course, individualised, et cetera, et cetera. But what would you say in response to Caroline?
Look, it's an interesting situation. A lot of people find themselves in that at the moment, Caroline, as well. So I'd sort of encourage you to sit down with a financial planner and actually have a good chat about your situation. You may see things in there that you're not seeing yourself potentially. There's no perfect answer for how much money you need to retire on or how much money you should enter retirement, because it's a juxtapositioning of the age pension and also your own superannuation pension mix in there as well. Owning your own home is very important. If you can do that, even drawing on your super to pay the rest of that mortgage out would be a reasonable idea, because it's a safety mechanism. It's less expense as you go on for accommodation purposes. But it'd be interesting to see what your situation is personally on that side. So it's not something I'd go into any detail on air, obviously.
But this is, and Caroline, I hear what you're saying there about the ABS, and they've got one figure and then there might be another figure from someone and so on. We just say, Phil, that you are planning on retiring soon, that you shouldn't be worried about what's happening on the stock exchange. There is no such thing as a perfect super balance. Then what do you need to think about in the face of economic uncertainty?
Well, you need to look at your personal circumstances in the big picture to see what your needs are in retirement, what lifestyle you're looking for, how much that will cost, and then work it back. Where is the money going to come from? What are you entitled to from government assistance, from the Centrelink age pension? And keep in mind, the vast bulk of retirees do get a full or a part age pension. There's not as many people as you would think who are fully self-funded on the retirement front. So that's a big chunk of what people will be relying on to provide an income in retirement. And then on top of that is what you can produce yourself out of your superannuation balance. And you'd be surprised at some of the, when you work through what the balances are and what the government assistance is and what you've got yourself, people can still have a reasonable good lifestyle with not a huge balance in super as well. So, it's one of those things to look at individual circumstances one-on-one.
Yeah, so you look, wanting that security and stability. Caroline, what do you think?
It's definitely food for thought. Got me now looking at, my job is I'm an analyst and I like to work with numbers. And I guess I'm in a better position than a lot because even though I do have a mortgage, and it's taking me a while to pay off because I'm single, live alone. I don't have a huge mortgage. So with interest rates going up at the moment, I'm not feeling the effect of it as bad as some people who've got like $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 mortgages.
And if you do have a smaller balance than that or a smaller mortgage than that, it works out a lot better on the actual cash flow.
Caroline, I'm really glad you called to share your story. Keep in touch. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Caroline at Banyo on ABC Radio Brisbane and Gold Coast. I'm Kat Feeney. Phil McGann is with you from Claritude Financial Planning. Look, is there anything else you'd just like to add? We've covered a lot this afternoon in regards to retirement, trying not to worry, making sure you're getting that personalised advice.
One thing to keep in mind is when you enter retirement as well is you'll tend to, in the first 5 to 10 years, spend a lot more than probably the latter part of retirement as well. You're doing a lot more travelling or you're sort of spending a lot more money on doing activities that you like doing when you're a bit younger. And when you get a bit older, you're probably staying home a little bit more. So don't be afraid to draw funds out of your super as well, to actually spend a bit more in the earlier part because there's no point passing all these funds over to your beneficiaries later on. And a lot of people, you'd be surprised, I think the figures are up to around about 70-odd%. People who retire, when they finally pass away, they actually have a bigger balance in their superannuation than when they retired because they're not drawing it down. So it really is a case of we are acclimatised to accumulate funds as we're working, but once you get to retirement, it's really a case of trying to de-accumulate as well because your superannuation is not, what was just term it it's not an estate planning tool, it's an income-producing investment. You have to draw money out of them each year. It's based on your life expectancy. The government makes you draw money out. They're designed to run out of money. That's the idea.
There we go. You're full of ideas, Phil, and it's been really interesting exploring this one with you this afternoon. Thank you so much.
No problems, Kat. Thank you very much.
Phil McGann with you from Claritude Financial Planning, of course, just emphasising again that our conversation's been general in nature and you are encouraged to seek your own financial advice.
On your radio and online.
At home or on the road.
This is ABC Radio.